All right, so this is the second part of the recap. This is the first book of the Bible, Genesis. This is the second half of it, chapters 26 through 50. This is a recap only in a kind of where you can find it capacity. I can't give you all the details. You're going to have to go back and watch the earlier videos. So, in the first half, we covered chapters 1 through 25. We talked through all the way through Abraham. Abraham has a son, Isaac and Ishmael. And Isaac is now who we're picking up with in chapter 26. He has a wife, Rebecca, and two sons. They are twin boys, Esau and Jacob. And so what we are looking at here is in chapter 26, it starts off with a famine in the land. They are planning to go into Egypt to kind of ride out this famine, and God warns them not to. And he tells Isaac, he restates the Abrahamic promise that fell to Isaac, that you're going to be blessed. Nations are blessed because of you, and that you're going to have descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky. And so they go and settle in a different place to kind of ride out this famine. They get there. He is worried for his life because his gorgeous wife is here. And he does like his father did and says, that's my sister, not my wife. So they get separated. And then over some time, the king actually sees him canoodling a bit with his wife, and is like, hey, friend, if that was your wife, you could have said that. You didn't have to cause no problems for us. This could have been real bad. I wasn't planning to sin against God like that. And so they are asked to move to this other place and live, since you can't be truthful going over here and live where you are. And so they move and they live. He goes through. He redigs the wells that his father had dug as he traveled around. And so there's some conversation about that as he starts to get settled and kind of live off of the land that is there. During that time, his son Esau gets two wives. He is 40 years old when he gets married. In chapter 27, Isaac has determined that he is old at this time to go ahead and give the blessing that he was given to his son Esau, who was the oldest of the two boys. And Rebecca hears this, his wife, and was like, I think that the son that God told me would be the head of his brother, I need to intervene. She over here trying to help God out. And so she creates this whole trick and ruse to make Isaac, who doesn't have great sight anymore, believe that Jacob, the kind of softer, indoorsy kind of son, is the outdoorsy hunter son that he is used to, that harder, kind of harsh, hairy son that he knows and knows to be his oldest of the two boys. So she creates this elaborate ruse, and they trick Isaac into passing the Abrahamic blessing on. I'm saying they because it's her idea. He went along with it. And so of course, when Esau finds out that after he did what his father had asked him to do, after he had he came in to get what his father had promised him, and it was already done. The blessing had already been passed. So his father does offer him a different blessing, just not the full big Abrahamic blessing where your descendants and the blessing for other nations are coming through you, that everything you touch is kind of going to prosper. He doesn't get that one. And so of course he is spitting mad. He is hot, and he definitely says some things that we don't see to be true. But he says that if he sees once his father closes his eyes, it's on and popping between him and his brother. He said it's a done deal. This man done played games for too long, and he gonna take him out. And so Rebecca, meddling again, instead of just owning up to it, saying, hey, it was me, I messed with this. She tells another lie that gets him sent off to go live with his uncle Laban, or her brother. So while he's off traveling in chapter 28, Esau overhears how displeased his parents are with his wives, the selection of wives that he chose, because they are locals from the area, not from their culture. So he goes to see Ishmael to see if he can get and marries one of his daughters to try and please his parents. Not a lot is talked about on Esau in this kind of thing, but he absolutely wanted to please his parents, wanted to be what they needed him to be, and we just kind of see him get it wrong time after time after time. So in chapter 28, Esau gets a new wife, And Jacob heads off to meet his uncle Laban, his mother's brother. And along the way, he has a dream where he sees the angels moving up and down this ladder between heaven and earth. That's the Jacob's ladder dream. It's in chapter 28. It's right there. And then he has a conversation where God makes a series of promises to him saying, hey, you're going to go into this land. You're going to become wealthy. It's going to be issues. I know it is, but I got you and I'm going to bring you out. And he says, God, are you serious? If you really do this, then I promise you, I'll worship you as my God. You made me a promise. If you keep this promise, then we're good to go. I'm not going to mess with nobody, no other gods, no other nothing. You're going to be my God and I'm going to worship you and I'm going to live by that. And he promises a tenth. He promises a tithe to God for this protection, for this coverage, for this peace, for everything that God is providing him, this promise that he's been given. And so, chapter 29, Jacob arrives at this land that he's traveling to, and he's like, how am I going to figure out which ones are my family? And so what he does is he sees some shepherd girls struggling, having a hard time with the other shepherds so that they can water their sheep, and he helps them out. And when he helps him out, he's holding a conversation and realizes he's talking to the daughters of the uncle that he's looking for. They're his cousins, basically. And he sees Rachel. And it talks about Rachel and Leah. And we have said a whole lot of things about Rachel and Leah. And my interpretation of this is Rachel is pretty, Leah is not. That's all I got. I don't think there's nothing wrong with this girl's eyes. I think she sees just fine. And I think she's just not the pretty one. Or she's not as pretty as her sister. Not that she's not the pretty one, but she's not what they consider to be as pretty as her sister. And so Jacob is like, oh, we family, we cousins. And so he moves in and he stays there for about a month. At the end of that month, he's like, all right, I gotta pull my weight. I gotta work around here. And so he has a conversation with Laban, and Laban is like, okay, so you work, if you're here, you're taking care of the house. You're not laying around doing nothing. You out here taking care of sheep. You're out here, handling things. You're cleaning, you're cooking, you're pulling your weight around here. So while you're here, I have to pay you for your time. What do you want? And so in chapter 29 is when he makes the agreement and he says, I will work for 7 years for Rachel. I don't have the money right now because I'm coming here traveling because I had to run with, what I could get. So he said, I'm coming here. I don't really have anything. I don't have a bride price. I don't have a dowry to pay. I don't have anything to offer you for your daughter's hand. So let me work 7 years. So the labor, the reward for the labor that I've given you, take that as her bride price. And he works for 7 years. And so we're still in chapter 29. It gets crazy in there. So the 7 years is up. It is time for the wedding. He goes in, they have this big feast, they have this big wedding. And typically when they had this wedding, the marriage is consummated, and he realizes after the marriage is consummated that he has been tricked and he was giving me the wrong sister, which is why I say she's not as pretty as her sister. I don't think it was anything real off with her. And he recognizes the next morning after he has consummated this marriage that this is the wrong sister. You played some games with me, Laban, and that's not what I agreed for. I worked 7 years. 7 years of labor. That's a lot of days. That's a lot of hard work. And so he goes back to his uncle, and his uncle is saying, cool, work 7 more years, give her honeymoon, and then I'll give you the wife you wanted, Rachel, but you have to work another 7 years. So he does not work 7 years, get a wife, work 7 years, get another wife. He works 7 years, get a wife, enjoys her for a week, gets another wife, works 7 years in whole. He's in debt. He's working his way out of debt with that one. So they also start to have children. Leah has 3 children right off the bat. There are 3 boys back to back to back. So for whatever she was or wasn't, she was a fruitful wife, and he was absolutely going to visit her. She got all her quality time. And then the 4th son is born, and there's a change in the way that she names the children. Before, she's naming her children kind of, hey, look at me, look at me, look at me. And in turn, and when she gets to the 4th son, Judah, she names him, the 4th son, she names Judah, sorry. And Judah is effectively praised, where she is thanking God for being a mom, thanking God for loving her in spite of not being able to get the love of her husband, in spite of all the foolishness that's going on, for allowing her to be blessed in the way that she is. Okay, We're going to pick it back up and move a little quickly again. So chapter 30, Rachel, of course, gets jealous because she's not having any kids. And her sister has now popped out 4 babies and she is still at 0. And so she says, all right, well, I'm going to give you my handmaid as a wife. And that handmaid becomes his wife. He spends some quality time with her. They have 2 boys. So he now has 6 sons. And then Leah is like, oh, wait a minute. She done had 2 babies and I've had none. Oh, something's wrong. I'm not having babies no more. So she in turn gives her maid to him. So he now has 4 wives and 6 children. And that maid has 2 more kids. And that's 2 more boys. So he has 8 sons at this point. And so somewhere along the lines, there is a situation where Rachel finds what they consider to be a fertility drug, a fertility item. There's some superstition involved in there. But she finds, Leah's son finds this. And Rachel is like, if you just give it to me so that I can get some help getting pregnant, you can have an extra night with him. And in that extra night, she manages to get pregnant yet again. And so now he has 9 sons. And then following that, there was another baby. And he has 9 sons and 1 daughter now. Leah actually gives him his only daughter. And so now Rachel finally has her first son, who is Joseph. Joseph, we all know Joseph in the color coat. We get ready to get to that. So she has her first son, Joseph, and at that point, Jacob is like, it's time to go. Let's pack up my family and let's go. I have 10 sons. And of these 10, I have 10 sons and a daughter. I have 11 children at this point. It's time to go and go back home. It's been a lot of years that I've been here. I'm not staying anymore. And so he packs up and he explains to his uncle Laban what he was planning to do. They talk about his wages, how they're going to separate their things out. And his uncle tricks him and hides what he's due as a reward for his work. And so in chapter 31, Jacob tells his wives, look, we finna leave. I got a plan. God showed me this thing on how it's going to work. And we're going to pack everything up and we're going to go. And his wives are like, hey, ain't nothing left here for us. Like, we with you now. We all in. We got kids. We done built a life. It's time to go ahead and move. Let's do it. And so they pack up. He gets the sheep that he's supposed to have. He separates everything out. That's his. And he gets on the road while Laban is 3 days away. So while Laban is away, he hears that they leave. He has to make the 3 days journey to get back to where the starting point and then catch up to him. And he rides them down and he gets to where they are. And this is chapter 31. It says that Rachel stole her father's idols. He has these idols that he worships or prays to, and he is upset about it and says that's the reason why he came. On the way there, he gets really, really close. The night before he reaches them, God sends him a dream, was like, you better not put your mouth on him. Don't say nothing. Don't say a word. Be careful. Watch your mouth. You can't curse him. You can't bless him. You can't do nothing. That's it. That's all. This is my man. Don't mess with him because you won't have to deal with me. And so they get there. They have this whole conversation. They call a truce on it. And he's like, you could have just let me say goodbye to my family. Like, all of this is mine. All these are my grandkids. These are my daughters. Like, these are my maids that grew up in my house. Like, you took everything from me. It's a big gaping hole and you never even let me say goodbye. So they had a conversation, and that may the Lord watch between me and thee while we're absent one from another. That benediction y'all be saying, y'all should probably study that a little bit. But that's where this is in chapter 31. So then he lets him go. In chapter 32, Jacob prepares to meet his brother. He is terrified. He left knowing his brother wanted to kill him, and he's certain that he ain't calmed down in all this time. And so he is terrified. He is trying his best not to be scared. He separates his family up into different camps. And while he is there, this is where Jacob wrestles an angel. It says there's a lot of conversation about whether it's an angel, whether it's God. It's an angel. It's a messenger of God. And so he's wrestling with this angel all night, and he's like, I'm not going to let go until you bless me. I don't know how he thought he was going to strong arm a blessing, but what he got was a name change, because you out here being foolish and wrestling with angels. And he got a limp for his trouble. So he walked for the rest of the time with his leg out of the socket, because he decided he was going to stay toe to toe and command something from God. But that is where Jacob wrestles the angel, or wrestles with the man all night long. Whew. Chapter 33. Jacob sends all of these gifts, all these things, droves of camels, droves of donkeys and sheep, and all these gifts to his brother. Servants and everything go out, and Esau refuses it all. I was like, I don't need no gifts. I'm just glad to have my brother back. I know I said some stuff. I was hotter than the collar with you, but I'm good now. I'm fine. Don't even worry about it. Like, I love you and I'm glad to see you. And they reunite and they welcome each other back. And so there is a time where Esau is like, hey, I brought these 300 men to cover and protect you as we travel. He probably should have just got on the road with his brother, but he didn't listen. And so he sent his brother back without him. And then he journeys on his own, kind of moving slowly because they have small children and small animals. And so he was like, all right, don't worry for me. So in chapter 34, this video has a trigger warning on it for chapter 34 because Dinah, his only daughter, is out and gets assaulted. She is raped. And when she is raped, the boy who raped her decided that he wanted to marry her. And so because she is now damaged goods, I will take her off your hands. And he went to her father and really asked if he could have her as his wife. Like, let me go and have her now. There ain't nobody else gonna want to marry her. Let me have her. And so her brothers was like, yeah, you could do that, but first you got to get circumcised, because if you get circumcised, you're like one of us. And now we can trade, and now we can be peaceful, and now we can do stuff. So what they do is they trick everybody into getting circumcised. Entire city, all the men in it have to be circumcised. And when they do, they go in and they murder the entire city while they are recovering. Take everybody out, everybody down. It was crazy. Again, watch the whole video on that. Okay, so so they destroyed this entire city. Jacob doesn't say anything. And then after that, Jacob cleans house. Jacob is like, hey, get rid of all your idols. Get rid of every piece of jewelry, anything that you have that even makes you think about these items. Get rid of it right now. We're going to get ourselves clean and ready to worship. And we're going to talk to God, and God is going to cover and protect us. And so he gets everybody right, and they all get covered and protected by God. They got rid of the things that took them outside of God, outside of the protection and the will of God, and he brought them all back in. And so as they're traveling, they are moving along, and in chapter 35, we say goodbye to Rachel. Rachel, in fact, is giving birth to her second son, and she dies giving birth. And she names him, but Jacob was like, you're not going to give him that name, and he got to carry this with him for the rest of his life. He changes the name a little bit. That changes the meaning of it. And while they're out and about and all the stuff is going on, one of his sons actually sleeps with one of his wives. He didn't sleep with his own mother. It's not like that. But he did sleep with one of his father's wives. So probably one of his brother's moms. And so there is a recap of all the children. It gives you a recap of what mom has what kids and in the order of it. So you see that he now has 12 sons and one daughter, 13 kids in total. And so there is, they get back home. So he does finally make it to his father's land. He does make it back before his father dies. All this time that he was gone, his father was alive. And so he comes back, and he and his brother bury his father together. Chapter 36 gives you a rundown of the descendants of Esau. We see them later on in chapters, which is why it's recorded here. Chapter 37, Joseph is now around 17 years old, and he has the ability to dream. And I point out that he dreams and interprets dreams. So do his brothers. He never says, I had this dream, here's what it means. He said, I had this dream, and his brothers and his father knew exactly what it was. So everybody has the ability to interpret dreams. Sometimes the gift is in your family so it can get to you. And so his brothers have a problem with him. His father obviously favors him. This is where he gets his coat of many colors. And his brothers are like, his father sends him to go check on his brothers and see what they're doing. He said, hey, go snitch on your brothers. I want you to go look and see what they're doing. And they are frustrated, sick of him, and ready to kill him. So instead of killing them, the conversation turns to just dropping him in a pit. And they end up selling him into slavery. He is sold into slavery and ends up in Egypt. There is a cutaway in chapter 38 where Judah, the fourth son, moves away. He has three sons. There are two older and one younger. The two older sons, the oldest of the boys, gets married. Is evil. God cuts him off. Because of the custom at the time, that son's wife gets rolled over to the next son, and he has to produce heirs for his brother. And this guy was like, I don't feel like I want to do that. So no matter what he did, he was not getting her pregnant on purpose. And so God cut him off because he was like, you out here doing, your heart wasn't right. God searched him and said, nah, you got a problem too. And so what he does is he sends her back to her father's house, and she tricks him into getting her pregnant, which would restore her as not being barren, which would restore her in her position as a widow with children, and would, put her in position to do what she needed to do in life based on the society that they currently live in. Not what God ordained, not rules that God gave us, but based on the society that they live in. And so they have a whole situation. You got to read it to figure it out. But that one is a kind of cutaway. Chapter 38, it talks about Judah and Tamar. But she does end up with twins, and she does get what she needs to get from the situation. Chapter 39, Joseph is now in Potiphar's house. He is raised up to a point where he is able to, he has a level of prestige. And then Potiphar's wife try and get at him. It don't work out well for anyone. He ends up in jail. He didn't touch her, by the way. And so in chapter 40, while he's in jail, he is, again, that spirit of excellence. The God's spirit is on him. The Abrahamic promise is resting on him. And everything he touches prospers. So he is there. And in chapter 40, he comes across two prisoners from Pharaoh's house, the butler and the cupbearer. And they each have a dream. He interprets their dream, and what he interprets for their dream becomes real. And what he says is, do not forget me. And the person who makes it back to the palace forgets him. In chapter 41, Pharaoh has a dream. And Pharaoh has this dream, and it's kind of a recurring dream. And so he calls all of his, all the king's horses, all the king's men. He calls everybody together, and they cannot help him. They can't interpret it. So then the person who made it back to the palace is like, oh, no, there's this guy that I knew in jail who could do this. And so he's brought out from prison. He interprets a dream, and the interpretation of the dream is that there is a famine coming, and it's a bad famine that's going to take everybody out. And so he's like, hey, here's how you prepare for it. Here's how you survive it. And so he's actually put in charge of managing this process so that the Egyptian people will have what they need to survive. In chapter 42, the famine happens, and it actually reaches the land where his father and his brothers are. So he's 1,005,000 miles away from home. He has been sold into slavery, all these other things. He has now been promoted, and the famine reaches the land where his father is. So his brothers are sent to go get food from Egypt. He recognizes his brothers. They do not recognize him. And so they come in to purchase food. He asks them a bunch of questions, and he was like, y'all are spies. Throws one of the brothers in jail, leaves the brother in jail, and sends them back with food and puts their money back in their bags. They get home, they panic and nervous. They wait like 2 years before they have to go back. They got enough food for 2 years before they go back. Left the whole brother in jail. He's still sitting there waiting. And so, and I think that's his get back. He got his get back a little bit on them brothers when he did this. So they come back, but they were asked to bring Benjamin, who is the younger brother to Joseph, who he hasn't seen in all the years that he's been gone. And so in chapter 43, they come back with Benjamin to get more food. And so when they come back this time, he's like, hey, let's just come and have lunch. And so they sit down and have a meal. And he takes a moment to step outside because he knows who they are. And he's happy to see his family is healthy. And they don't know who he is yet. Chapter 44. Joseph packs them up with food again. Take whatever you need from here. And he puts their money back in it again. But this time he also adds his silver cup and sends soldiers after him. And he was like, I think they stole from me. And so the soldiers go out. and they go to get him, and they're like, we ain't take nothing. You know, somebody took something, you know, they should be punished. And he was like, oh, okay, it's you took it. And so they realize it's Benjamin. So these brothers go back in there to plead for their lives because they could not go home without Benjamin because of the way their father feels about losing 2 sons from his favorite wife. And so in chapter 44, Judah pleads their case. There's like a long monologue where he is like, y'all cannot do this. You will kill my father. You will kill us. There's no way in the world we can go back. I promise the lives of my kids. Like, he's begging to make sure that they are going to survive this and get Benjamin back home. In chapter 45, Joseph clears the room. He was like, hey, if you ain't one of these dudes right here, you gotta get out. So he clears the room. He reveals himself to his brother and is like, yo, it's me. It's Joseph. I've been messing with y'all this whole time. I'm just happy to see you, and I needed to know that y'all are good and you're okay. How's my dad? And so he sends for his brothers. He sends for his brothers to go back, get his father. Y'all can ride out the famine here. We got what we need. Don't even worry about it. We cover here. There's no problem. We are safe. And so the brothers go, and before they leave, Pharaoh has overheard this reunification happening. He's like, hey, take the chariots. Yo, load up everything you need. Just royal chariots. So that way your father knows that this is true. Your father is for real. And y'all not in here trying to drive this caravan, you know, and y'all hungry and all these other things. Like, he's like, he sent the chariots so they would travel in style. And so they all come and they move in, and he's saying you can live in Goshen. So in chapter 46, there is a list of everybody who comes into Egypt. There's a list. The reason why there's a list of people coming in is because there's a count of people who come out. And so you get to see the growth of this nation that God promised Abraham. That's now several generations later. These are generations after he's died. And you get to see who goes into Egypt and how many people come out. And so while they're there, the famine is continuing. And this is chapter 46, the father and son reunite. But in chapter 47, they get to meet Pharaoh. So they're not just, you know, nobodies. They get to come in and go meet the king. So they meet Pharaoh, and the famine continues, and they're safe and taken care of. But Egypt is getting rich. They collect all the money from people, all the livestock from people. People are trading everything they have for food. And so Egypt, the government of Egypt, is getting richer and richer and richer. In chapter 48, Joseph brings his 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, in to meet their grandfather, and he blesses them because he's getting ready to pass. And so he prays over and blesses them. And he calls the youngest first and the oldest second, so that he switches the order of them. He again confirms God's promise. So this Abrahamic promise is still being passed on. He also adopts in the sons. Joseph is a slave in Egypt. He belongs to Egypt. He's not free to leave whenever he wants to. So he adopts his sons back into this faith. They've been raised as Egyptians. They have an Egyptian mom. He adopts their sons back into the faith. In chapter 49, Joseph has a conversation with all of his sons. He calls all his sons around, and he either blesses or curses them, depending on who they are and what they get. But it's not specific to them. It is their legacy. He kind of foretells what the legacy of these people are going to be. And then he gives his last request. He was like, hey, bury me with my wife, bury me with my daddy and my granddaddy and my mama and my grandmama. Take me back. Do not leave me in Egypt. Get my bones up out of here. Just take me back. And so he gives his last request. And then in chapter 50, we reach the end. In chapter 50, Jacob's funeral happens, and Pharaoh actually rolls out the red carpet. They travel. They take him back to where he wanted to be buried with his wife, Leah. He is buried with Leah. Leah has the distinction of being buried with the wives, with Rebecca and Isaac, with Abraham and Sarah. She is buried with him, and she gets that distinction of wife there. And so, of course, after this funeral, the brothers are like, hey, he finna get us back now that daddy not here to protect us. And he promises them. We see kind of one of the first places in the Bible where we see it, what you meant for bad, God meant for good. And that's where he points out, and that's kind of a shining point where this ends towards the end. Of course, the chapter ends with Joseph passing and him asking his brothers to promise that they are going to remove him from Egypt when they leave. Take my bones with you. And in fact, when you see the Exodus, they actually do remove his bones. But want to leave that on that point. What you meant for bad, God meant for good. You knew what your heart was. You knew what you were doing, but God had the final say in it. And so thank you to everybody who followed all of this. If you watched these videos first and kind of went back and nitpicked what you were going to study or what you needed help with, that's cool. This is a tutoring situation. So please, questions, comments, concern, any of those things, drop them here. This is the video for that. We talk about Genesis, but there's a whole big Bible. So again, thank you for all of your support, all of your time, and you all be blessed.